Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my review of the book, A Column of Fire by Ken Follett. This is the third book in the Kingsbridge series. I have read and reviewed the first two books from the series, The Pillars of the Earth and World Without End. And these two were top books of the year for me. And I mean top books of the year. They will both be in my top 5. That shows you just how amazing an author Ken Follett really is. And I was very excited going into A Column of Fire. Now, this book, in my opinion, I'll just go ahead and spoil my thoughts on this basically. This, I think, is the weakest of the three. And yet, these books are so darn good that even as the weakest book, it's still a 9 out of 10. That's how amazing these books are. Even with me thinking this is weaker, it's still an amazing book. That's just how good it is. But this book is the first book, Pillars of the Earth, takes place in the 1100s England. The second book, World Without End, takes place in 1300s England. And so you guessed it, Column of Fire takes place in 1500s England. But this is starkly different from the first two books. Pillars of the Earth is almost entirely taking place in the town of Kingsbridge and is almost entirely about the building of the cathedral. You have all the people around it and their storylines and the romances and the tragedies and the comedy, everything that's happening in the town. But that it's all focused, hyper-focused into the town of Kingsbridge. And then in the second book, you know, the cathedral's built, and 200 years later, the second book is about the people of Kingsbridge as they deal with the Black Death, as they deal with the 100 Years' War, and you see them have to build a new hospital, and they have to build a new big bridge. And so it's about building those new big bridge and hospital, and also caring for people during the Black Death and whatnot. And so this book also is very honed in on Kingsbridge itself. Now, a decent amount, a couple hundred pages, might go off, and you might go to France for a bit with your main characters for an excursion. But the vast majority of this 1,000-page tome takes place in Kingsbridge. That's okay. So the first two books take place almost entirely in Kingsbridge. Very little of A Column of Fire actually takes place in Kingsbridge. The high majority, I'd say like 70 or 80% of that book, actually takes place in other places. The book takes place in Spain, in France, in England, in London, England, in these other castles, these other locations, but very little of it is in Kingsbridge. Now, most of the characters have ties to Kingsbridge and are anchor characters. Like each book's set of books has like an anchor character that you're following. You have Jack in Pillars of the Earth, you have Murthen in World Without End, and in A Column of Fire you have our main character, why am I blanking on his name? Not Marjorie, Ned Willard. And so, for the most part, you're following Ned is like the main protagonist, and he's of course from Kingsbridge. And in this book, they're going out and dealing with the various political situations. This is the most macro book of the series. You are seeing big picture events in this book, which I really enjoyed reading about because I am a history teacher and I loved reading about history. I love the discussion of the reign of Bloody Mary and the reign of Queen Elizabeth and the reign of Mary Queen of Scots and the reign of King James, and you're reading about these events in their reign, like the Protestant versus Catholic conflicts, like the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, like the French invasion, attempted invasion, like the Spanish Armada attack, like the gunpowder plot of Guy Fawkes. And so you're seeing these major historical events from the perspective of our cast of characters in this book. And so from that perspective, it was so entertaining. And my favorite portion of the book, by far, was the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, where the Catholics in France are going out and slaughtering the Huguenots. I thought that storyline was so well done. I was so connected to them. It very much reminded me of some sequences in the first two books. It was just excellently plotted, excellently written. The characters were written, the themes were written well. Everything was great about the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. I think that it was a little bit of a reach to go all the way into the Guy Fawkes Day stuff. I was like, all right, let's get focused on the characters. And this has the largest cast of characters of all the books, which is ironic because these 1,000-page books, you'd think that they would have large casts. The first two books actually had pretty small casts. The third book really has a really large cast, and they're spread out. And so there wasn't quite as much character depth and focus. And I think that made me not connect with the main characters. It's a reason why it took me a second to remember the main character. The main character, you have Ned, he's in love with Marjorie. They're, of course, the anchor characters, but you also have Barney that you're following. You have Pierre, Armand. We have Sylvie that we're following. We have... I forgot her name. The girl who is the handmaiden to Mary, Queen of Scots. So there's all these characters who have major political stuff going on. And I particularly really enjoyed the themes regarding Protestantism versus Catholicism. Ken Follett doesn't really explore the actual religion itself. He does not explore the divide within Christianity between Protestantism and Catholicism. What he's more interested in is how did that divide lead to war and conflict and death and destruction. And so you're not seeing a theological debate in this as much. You're much more seeing a power debate, and you're seeing a power imbalance between the Catholics and Protestants. And at one point, when Bloody Mary is queen, the Catholics are all on top. And then when Queen Elizabeth is queen, the Protestants are all on top. And Mary, Queen of Scots, is trying to become queen, the Catholics are on top again. And so there's this constant struggle. Oh, and you have Rollo, who is this Catholic hardliner who just cannot stand Protestantism and was willing to even fight against his own country if it means bringing back Catholicism. And it was just such fascinating historical stuff that's happening. And of course, most of the characters, like our main cast, our POV characters, are almost entirely made up. But the events surrounding them, the events that Ken Follett is putting these characters into, are real events. And also the history itself matches up. And you're reading about what life was like at the time. Very much Pillars of the Earth, World Without End feel like they match the 1100s and 1300s. There wasn't a huge difference between them, but there is a big difference between the 1300s and the 1500s. And so the way he describes things is very different. There's a new world now. Not everybody is over there, but expeditions are going to the new world, and there's a few Spanish colonies over in the new world, and British are ramping up to prepare to send colonies there. So it's very interesting reading about the how the world was developed in the 1500s, and I thought that the themes were great, the plotting was great. I have a nitpick about the book, and again, this is a nitpick. It's not so much a nitpick of Ken Follett, more a nitpick of the publisher, which I believe this is the same publisher as the other two books. Let me verify if that is indeed the case, because this one was done by Dutton. This one was done by so these are different publishers, but still, my criticism is still going to be the same, that the font size in all three of these is different. So the font size in Pillars of the Earth is super tiny, and the spacing with the font is super close together. Then you go to World Without End, which page-wise is longer than Pillars of the Earth, but if you were to, but the font is larger just a tiny bit, and the font spacing in this book is a little bit larger. And then you go to Column of Fire, which is about 900 pages, in that same range, 900 to 1,000, but it's about 900 pages, and the font size is significantly larger, and the spacing is significantly larger than the other two. And to me, this makes me think that the book itself is a decent bit shorter, but the publisher didn't want to have a shorter book because people would think it doesn't have the gravitas, perhaps, or that it wouldn't match with the other books, so they changed the font size and the spacing in order to make it match with the other books. And maybe it's because it's from three different publishers, but it's the same series. You should be able to figure out how to do, if the books are done in this font type, you should do them all in the same font type. Like, it's just a little frustrating to me. And that's, it's a nitpick, again. But anyway, again, this series has a lot of elements that are not the most pleasant to read about. You are reading about how terrible life was and how just the depravity of humanity at times. I will say this book has the least rape in it of all the books, and has the least sexual assault and all that stuff. So in that sense, this it's it's much nicer. But there's still a lot. It's a Ken Follett book. There's a lot of sexual elements to it, which is very frustrating. But I still, from a historical perspective, I was just fascinated by it, and I loved the discussions of the events and the political machinations, and I could see the types of what types of people are supporting this group and what types are supporting this group, and how the Pope was involved. And just as a history teacher, it just made me have a lot of delight reading this. So I still loved reading this book. It is a great book, but if you look at it compared to the others, it's the weakest so far in the series. But on its own, it's a fantastic book. And I do wonder whether or not Ken Follett had the idea for the book and saw the sales of the Kingsbridge books, like Pillars of the Earth and World Without End, and said, if I make it part of that series, it'll sell better. So I wonder if he wrote it this way so that it would sell better, or if he always intended it to be a Kingsbridge book. It's just that it got away from him and became this huge, big other book. Because really, at its heart, it's not a Kingsbridge book. It's very much separated from Kingsbridge. I have on my shelves The Evening and the Morning, and I intend to get The Armor of Light, and I'm hoping that both of those focus more on Kingsbridge again, because I really like it when it felt like that's why Pillars of the Earth and World Without End have a special place in my heart, because they are quintessential Middle Ages, and also they are very hyper focused on what they're doing. This is like a big epic sprawling book, and it is like the Reformation, Renaissance, moving into the Age of Exploration. So it's like in the middle of that time period of transformation, and so it just feels kind of odd. It feels like it doesn't, you couldn't say this is quintessential Middle Ages. It's not quintessential anything. It's just kind of a mishmash because it's happening right when the world was changing. So I enjoyed Column of Fire. If you've enjoyed it, let me know what you thought of it, and tell me what scenes were your favorites, what were your least favorites, all those stuff. I love talking about that with you in the comments down below. And what do you think of the other two that I haven't read yet? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.